The small town was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's business. Streets lined with old oak trees, front porches with rocking chairs, and neighbors who waved hello even if they didn't know your name. It was quiet, peaceful in many ways, but also a place where old habits and old ideas lived on like shadows no one bothered to chase away. Into this town walked a man. He was calm, carried himself with a quiet confidence, and moved like someone who had seen much of the world but preferred to keep to himself. His skin was dark, and his eyes held a sharpness that suggested a mind always alert, always ready. Most people passed by without giving him much thought. Some stared, curious or unsure, but he kept his head down, didn't invite trouble. He had come home for the first time in years, not because he wanted to, but because he had to. Things had changed a lot in the world since he left, and yet some things stayed the same. The man was not just anyone. Few knew this, but he had been part of one of the most elite military units in the country. His skills, his training were beyond what most could imagine. But here in this quiet town, he was just a stranger. A group of men from the town noticed him soon after his arrival. They were loud, rough around the edges, and carried a bitterness that didn't quite belong to this peaceful place. They called themselves a team, but really they were just a group of men who spent their days drinking and gossiping, holding on tightly to old prejudices. The man's presence unsettled them, and they began watching him closely. At first it was small things, whispers behind cupped hands, glances that lasted too long, cold shoulders when he walked by. But soon the whispers grew louder and the glances turned into stares filled with suspicion. The man noticed, but he didn't react. He understood how fear could twist people, how ignorance could make strangers into enemies. One afternoon, the man stopped at a local grocery store. The place was small and old-fashioned, with shelves that creaked and a bell that jingled every time the door opened. Inside, a few people recognized him but said nothing. The men from the group were there too, pretending to look at things but really watching him. One of them, the loudest and most aggressive, moved closer. "Hey, you don't belong here," the man said, voice low and steady. The man said nothing at first. He just looked at the speaker, calm but serious. He wasn't interested in trouble, but he wasn't afraid either. The group laughed, trying to show strength in numbers. But the man's eyes didn't waver. They were full of experience and a quiet warning that this wasn't the kind of man you could push around easily. That evening, word spread around town. Some people whispered about the man, calling him all kinds of names behind closed doors. Others wondered what he was really doing back. But no one really knew. The man kept to himself, never answering questions, never inviting conversation. Days passed. The group grew bolder. They started following him from a distance, watching where he went and what he did. They didn't understand why he didn't fight back or leave town. Their anger grew, but so did their fear. There was something about him they couldn't figure out, something that made their bravado seem fragile. The man noticed everything. He could feel their eyes on him, the tension in the air, but he remained calm. He knew that this wasn't a place for fights or loud words, not yet. He had to wait, to see how things would unfold. One evening, as the sun set behind the trees, the man sat on a bench near the edge of town. The air was cool and the sky was painted with soft colors. The group appeared again, walking toward him with slow steps, their faces hard and their voices low. "You don't belong here," one said again, this time closer, but the man didn't move. "No," the man replied simply. "I belong wherever I choose." The group's leader took a step forward, tension rising like a storm ready to break. But before anything could happen, a woman from the nearby house called out, telling them to leave the man alone. She had seen the man in a different light. She had watched how he carried himself, how he never caused harm, and she believed in giving people a chance. The group hesitated, then muttered curses under their breath. They left, but not without throwing dark looks. The man remained on the bench, his expression unreadable. He knew this was only the beginning. That night, the man sat by the window of the small house he was staying in. The world outside was quiet, but inside his mind was busy. He thought about the town, about the people who lived there, about the prejudice that lingered like smoke. He also thought about himself, about what he had done, who he had been, and what he still was beneath the calm surface. He was a soldier, trained to survive, to protect, to lead. But here, in this town, he would have to fight a different battle, a battle for respect, for understanding, for peace. As the night deepened, he made a promise to himself. He wouldn't run. He wouldn't hide. He would face whatever came with patience and strength, because this was his home whether they accepted him or not. And so the quiet man with the dark eyes waited for the next chapter to begin. The days after that evening felt heavier than before. The man noticed it right away, the way the air seemed thicker, the way whispers followed him wherever he went. It was as if the whole town was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The group of men had not forgotten him. In fact, their suspicion had only grown stronger. They talked among themselves, sometimes in hushed tones, sometimes loud enough for others to hear. Their eyes burned with a mixture of fear and anger, though neither they nor anyone else would admit that. To them, it was about protecting their town, their way of life. But what they really fought was the unknown. The man, for his part, kept his routine simple. He walked the same paths, visited the same stores, and sat on the same bench each evening. He wasn't looking for trouble, but he didn't shy away from it either. His silence was a shield and a signal. He was not here to cause harm, but he was not weak. Some people in town began to notice the tension and felt uneasy. A few kind souls wondered if the man might be more than just a stranger passing through. They saw the way he carried himself, the way his eyes watched and listened carefully. They saw that he did not respond to the group's hostility with anger or fear. Instead, he was calm, even patient. One afternoon, the man entered the local diner. The smell of fresh coffee and warm bread filled the air. He sat at a corner table where the sunlight came in through the window. The waitress, an older woman who had lived in the town all her life, recognized him. She brought over a cup of coffee without asking, a small gesture of kindness. "First time around here, ain't it?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Yes, I just arrived." She smiled gently. "Well, you picked a quiet place. Sometimes too quiet, if you ask me." He smiled back, appreciating the small connection. But as he sipped his coffee, the group from before entered the diner. Their loud voices and rough manners filled the room. They noticed the man immediately and sat at a table nearby, their eyes never leaving him. Their presence made the other customers uncomfortable. Some tried to ignore them, but the tension was hard to miss. One of the men leaned toward another and said quietly, "He's hiding something. Doesn't act like someone from around here." The man overheard but said nothing. He knew their words came from fear, from a place of misunderstanding. The leader of the group stood up suddenly and walked over to the man's table. His voice was sharp. "You don't belong here. You better leave." The man looked up slowly, meeting the man's gaze. His voice was calm but firm. "I'm not going anywhere." The diner grew silent. The other customers watched, waiting to see what would happen next. The leader laughed, a harsh sound. "You think you can stay here, scare us all, and just act like it's no big deal?" "No," the man said quietly. "I'm not here to scare anyone." "Then what do you want?" the leader demanded. "Peace," the man replied simply. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the leader turned and went back to his table, the others following. The silence in the diner remained thick and heavy. Outside, the group gathered quickly. They whispered and argued. Some wanted to push the man out immediately. Others were afraid of what he could do. They decided to watch him more closely, to find out who he really was. The man knew this would not end soon. He had faced enemies before, ones with weapons and plans to hurt him. But this was different. This was a fight against fear and hate that had lived in this town for a long time. That night, the man sat by the window again, thinking. He thought about the people who judged him without knowing him, about the group that wanted to drive him away. He thought about the promises he had made to himself, about the strength he needed to keep. He also thought about the power of patience. The next morning, the man went to the town library. It was a quiet place with shelves full of books and newspapers. The librarian, a gentlewoman who had worked there for many years, greeted him warmly. "Looking for anything in particular?" she asked. "No," he replied. "Just looking to understand this place better." She nodded as if she understood. "That's a good reason." He spent hours reading about the town's history, its people, and its struggles. He learned about moments of kindness and moments of pain. He read about the divisions that had never fully healed, about fears passed down through generations. As he read, the man began to plan. Not plans of violence or revenge, but plans of change. He knew that to make a difference here, he would have to do more than just wait. HOA would have to show who he really was, not with words, but with actions. Over the next few days, the man started small. He helped an elderly neighbor carry groceries, fixed a broken fence for another, and quietly listened when people spoke about their worries. Slowly, some people began to see him differently, not as a threat but as someone who cared. But the group watching him did not change. They grew more suspicious, more restless. They started meeting late at night, making plans they thought would protect their town. One evening, as the man walked home, he felt the eyes on him again. The group was nearby, hidden but watching. They whispered about what they should do next, their voices low but filled with anger. The man stopped walking and faced the darkness. He spoke softly but with strength. "You don't have to be afraid." There was no answer. The group stayed hidden, unsure. He continued, "I am not your enemy, but I will not run from you." The silence stretched between them like a thin line. Then slowly the group disappeared into the night. The man knew that the real test was still ahead. But he also knew this. Sometimes the hardest battles were not fought with fists or guns, but with courage and patience. He looked up at the stars, feeling the weight of the past and the hope for the future. In this small town, a change was beginning, one small step at a time. The days turned into weeks, and the man's presence in the town became impossible to ignore. The group that had once watched him with cold eyes grew more restless. They had no clear reason to attack, but their fear and anger pushed them closer to crossing a line. The man, however, stayed calm, his mind always sharp, his patience steady. He understood the weight of what was happening. This was not just about him. It was about the old wounds the town carried, the fear of the unknown and the walls people built around themselves. He was an outsider, yes, but more importantly, he was someone who could help change those walls. One evening, the man was walking along a quiet path near the edge of town. The sun had just set, and the sky was painted with soft pink and orange hues. The air was cool and the sounds of crickets filled the silence. It was a peaceful moment, but he knew it was fragile. Suddenly, he heard footsteps behind him, slow, deliberate. He didn't panic. His training had taught him to stay calm in every situation. He stopped and turned slowly, facing the shadows that moved closer. 3 men appeared from the darkness. They were part of the group that had been following him, their faces hard and eyes filled with suspicion. They didn't speak at first, just stood there waiting. The man's voice broke the silence. "What do you want?" One of the men stepped forward, his voice rough. "We want to know why you're here, why you won't leave." The man looked at each of them carefully. "I'm here because this is my home." They laughed bitterly. "This isn't your home. You don't belong here." "Home isn't just a place," the man said quietly. "It's where you decide to stand." The men exchanged uneasy looks. They had expected anger or fear. Instead, they found calm and confidence. It was unsettling. One of the men, younger than the others, spoke again. "People here don't like change, especially not from someone they don't understand." The man nodded slowly. "I understand that fear. But change is part of life. You can fight it or you can learn from it." There was silence again. The men seemed unsure what to do next. Then, without another word, they turned and walked away into the night. The man watched them go, his heart steady but aware. He knew this was just the beginning. They were testing him, trying to find weakness. But he was stronger than they thought. Over the next few days, the man continued to move through the town with quiet purpose. He helped where he could, always respectful, never pushing. He fixed a broken step on a porch, helped carry firewood, and even shared a quiet smile with a child who waved as he passed. Some people began to see him differently. They started to speak kindly, to ask questions, to offer small gestures of friendship. The town was slowly changing, but the group remained angry. They felt their power slipping. To them, the man was a challenge to everything they believed. They met often in secret, planning, arguing, trying to decide how to deal with this stranger who refused to be scared away. One night, the group made a decision. They would confront the man directly. Not to hurt him, they said, but to warn him, to make sure he knew he was not welcome. The man knew this could happen. He had prepared himself for moments like this. When the group arrived, they found him sitting quietly on the bench near the park, just as he often did in the evenings. The leader of the group stepped forward. His voice was low but filled with anger. "You've stayed long enough. This is your last warning." The man looked up at him calmly. "I don't want to fight you. I only want peace," the leader sneered. "Peace you don't understand. We protect this town. We protect our way of life by spreading fear." the man asked gently. By judging without knowing? The leader's face twisted with rage. He moved closer, his voice rising. You think you're better than us? Just because you won't leave? The man stood slowly, his body relaxed but ready. I don't think I'm better. I know who I am. The group tensed. They saw the calm strength in the man's eyes and felt a flicker of doubt. But anger pushed them forward. Suddenly the man moved, not fast but with precision. He stepped between two of the men as if blocking them, his hands raised to show he meant no harm. The men stopped, surprised by the quiet control he held. I'm not here to fight, the man said again, but I will defend myself if I must. The leader hesitated, then nodded slowly. Maybe you're not who we thought. The others looked uncertain. The moment held in the air between them was heavy with possibility. The man took a deep breath. I want to help this town. To heal, not harm. A silence followed. The group slowly backed away, leaving the man standing alone in the fading light. That night, the man sat by the window of the small house where he stayed. His mind replayed the confrontation. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, but he also knew something important. Respect could not be demanded. It had to be earned. In the days that followed, the man reached out quietly to those who were willing to listen. He spoke with kindness, shared stories, and showed patience. Some in the town began to change. Old fears softened and new understanding grew, but the man never forgot the group. He knew they still watched, still waited for a chance to push him away, and so he prepared. Not for war, but for peace, because sometimes the greatest strength lies in the calm before the storm. The morning sun filtered gently through the curtains as the man sat quietly at the kitchen table. Outside, the world was waking up, but inside, his thoughts were heavy with everything that had happened. The town had changed around him, slowly but surely, but the group of men still lingered in the shadows, their anger simmering just below the surface. That day, the man decided it was time to speak more openly. He needed to let people see who he really was, to break through the walls built by fear and misunderstanding. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he also knew it was necessary. He went to the town hall, a small building that was the center of many community gatherings. A few people were already there, curious to see the stranger who had quietly become part of their lives. The man's presence made some uncomfortable, but others watched with interest. He cleared his throat softly and began to speak, his voice calm and steady. I want to tell you about myself. I want to be honest, so there are no more fears or questions. He paused, looking around the room, meeting eyes with the people there. I served in the military, in a special unit. I was trained to protect, to lead, and to fight for peace. A few people shifted in their seats, surprised. Some whispered quietly, unsure how to react. I didn't come here to cause trouble or to fight. I came home because this is where I belong. I want to be part of this community, to help where I can. He spoke of his experiences not as a boast, but as a way to show who he was beneath the quiet exterior. He talked about discipline, respect, and the importance of understanding each other. The room was silent when he finished. Then slowly a woman stood up. Thank you for your honesty, she said softly. It's hard to understand people we don't know. I think we all have things to learn. Others nodded, some clapped quietly. The man felt a small but important change in the air, but not everyone was ready to listen. The group of men who had watched him with suspicion were still gathered outside. When they heard about the meeting, they felt anger and betrayal. To them, the man was still a stranger, a threat to the town's way of life. That night, the group confronted the man again. This time, they were less angry and more confused. Why did you tell them all that? The leader asked. You're just making us look bad. I told the truth, the man replied calmly. Because the truth is stronger than fear. The men looked at each other, unsure what to say. They had expected the man to remain silent or to fight back with anger. Instead, he had chosen honesty and patience. One of the younger men spoke up, his voice quieter than before. Maybe we judged you too quickly. The man nodded. It happens to all of us, but we can choose to change. The group stayed for a while, talking quietly. It wasn't an easy conversation, but it was real. For the first time, walls began to come down. The next day, the man visited some of the neighbors who had been kind to him. He helped with chores, shared meals, and listened to their stories. He learned about their lives, their struggles, and their hopes. In return, they learned about him, not just the soldier, but the man who cared deeply about peace and community. Word spread through the town. More people began to approach the man with kindness. Children waved as he passed. Shopkeepers smiled, and even some of the men from the group looked on with less suspicion. One afternoon, the man received a visit from the leader of the group. It was unexpected but welcome. "I wanted to talk," the leader said, sitting down cautiously. "Good," the man replied. "I want to listen." They spoke for a long time about fears, mistakes, and the possibility of change. It wasn't a perfect conversation, but it was a start. The man knew there was still work to do. Old wounds don't heal overnight, but the first steps had been taken. In the weeks that followed, the town began to feel different. The man continued to live quietly but confidently, always ready to help, always ready to listen. He had faced many battles before, but this one, the battle for understanding, was the most important. As the sun set one evening, the man stood outside looking over the town. The future was uncertain, but hope was growing. For the first time in a long time, he felt at peace. The town had changed. Not all at once and not completely, but there was a shift in the air. People moved with lighter steps, conversations were warmer, and the quiet tension that had once hung over the streets began to fade. The man had become more than a stranger passing through. He was part of the community. But deep down, he knew the work was not finished. Change, especially change of this kind, was a slow process. There were still old fears, old habits, and old wounds that needed care. One morning, the man woke early and went to the town's small community center. Today was a day for gathering, for sharing stories, and for coming together. It was a day that many hoped would bring the town closer. As he entered the room, he saw faces both familiar and new. Some wore smiles, others wore cautious expressions. The man took a seat near the front, ready to listen and to speak when the moment came. The first to stand was an older man who had once been wary of the stranger. His voice was steady but kind as he spoke about the town's history, the struggles, the joys, the divisions. Then others shared their stories. A young woman spoke about her hopes for a better future. A father talked about the importance of teaching children kindness. One by one, voices filled the room, weaving a tapestry of shared experience. When it was the man's turn, he stood quietly. He did not speak of his past military service this time. Instead, he spoke of what he had learned here. "I came to this town as a stranger," he said softly. "I saw fear and anger, but I also saw hope. I learned that we all carry stories, and sometimes those stories keep us apart." He paused, letting his words settle. "But I believe we can come together. We can choose to see each other not as enemies, but as neighbors, as friends." The room was silent for a moment, then filled with quiet nods and smiles. Outside, the sun shone brighter than it had in weeks. The man stepped out, feeling the warmth on his face. For a moment, he let himself believe in the change he hoped for. That evening, as the town grew quiet, the man walked along the familiar streets. He passed the houses he had come to know, the faces that had welcomed him, and even those who still held their distance. He knew not everyone would accept him or the change he represented. But he also knew that small steps forward were victories. As he walked, he thought about the strength it took to face fear, not with anger, but with courage. He thought about the power of kindness, patience, and honesty. He thought about the future. The next morning, the man received a visit from a young boy who had watched him with curiosity for many days. The boy held out a small hand-carved wooden bird. "I made this for you," the boy said shyly. The man smiled and accepted the gift with gratitude. "Thank you. It's beautiful." The boy beamed, and the man felt a warmth spread inside. It was a simple moment, but one filled with meaning. As days passed, more moments like this came. Invitations to community events, friendly greetings, and shared meals. The town was healing, slowly but surely. The group of men who had once opposed the man no longer gathered with anger. Some still kept their distance, but others had begun to understand. A few even offered nods of respect when they saw him. One afternoon, the man found himself walking alongside the leader of the group. They spoke quietly, honestly. "We didn't understand you before," the leader admitted, "but I see now you're not the enemy." The man nodded. "We all have fears, but when we face them together, we become stronger." The leader smiled faintly. "Maybe this town can be better." The man smiled back. "It already is." The seasons changed, and with them the town grew. People came together in new ways. sharing work, celebrating festivals, and building friendships. The man had come here as a stranger, met with fear and suspicion, but through patience, courage, and kindness, he had helped the town see beyond its fears. He had helped them see the power of understanding. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, the man stood at the edge of town. The sky was painted with colors of hope, soft pinks, warm oranges, and deep purples. He thought of the journey he had taken, the battles he had faced, both in distant lands and here, at home. And he knew this. True strength was not in weapons or power, but in the courage to face fear with kindness, to choose peace when anger called, and to believe in the possibility of change. The town was not perfect, and neither was he. But together they had taken the first steps toward a better future, and that was enough. The town was slowly waking up to a new way of living. People who once avoided each other now nodded in passing, shared small smiles, and sometimes even stopped for brief conversations. The man watched these changes quietly, knowing that progress was never quick, but always meaningful. He spent many mornings walking through the streets, greeting neighbors and helping with small tasks around the town. He fixed a broken bench at the park, helped clear debris after a storm, and even taught a group of young children some basic skills like tying knots and teamwork exercises. The children laughed and listened eagerly, their bright eyes full of hope and curiosity. Despite all the progress, the man never forgot the difficult moments. He knew some people still held tight to old fears. He had heard whispers late at night, sensed the hesitation in some voices, and seen the guarded looks on certain faces. But he did not let this discourage him. Instead, he used it as a reminder to stay patient, kind, and open. One afternoon, the man was invited to speak at the town school. It was a small gathering, mostly students and a few teachers, but it was important. The man wanted to share his story, not as a soldier or a stranger, but as someone who had learned the power of courage and understanding. He stood before the room, his eyes meeting those of the young listeners. "When I came here, I was different," he began. "People were afraid of me because they didn't know me. I understand that fear because I have felt it too." The children listened quietly, some nodding. "But I learned something very important," he continued. "Fear can keep us apart, but kindness can bring us together. We don't have to be the same to be friends. We don't have to agree on everything to respect each other." He told them about teamwork, about looking beyond what is different, and about the strength found in helping others. After his talk, many children came forward asking questions, sharing their own stories and thanking him for his words. The man smiled, feeling hopeful about the future. Meanwhile, the town continued to grow in small ways. The local diner began to see more customers, people sharing meals and stories. The storekeepers started leaving their doors open longer, welcoming neighbors. Even the group of men who had once opposed the man began to soften. They watched him work, saw how others respected him, and slowly began to change their own hearts. One evening, the man sat with the leader of that group on the porch of an old house. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the land. "I never thought I'd say this," the leader said, "but I'm glad you stayed. You helped us see things differently." The man nodded. "I didn't come here to fight. I came to build something better." They talked long into the night, sharing stories and dreams for the town's future. The walls between them were coming down. Life was not perfect. There were still moments of tension and misunderstanding, but now there was hope and a willingness to listen. One day the man received a letter from someone he hadn't expected to hear from, a former teammate from his military days. The letter was filled with encouragement and pride. It reminded the man of where he came from and the strength he carried with him. He smiled, feeling the weight of both past and present. His journey had taken him far, not just across lands, but into the hearts of people who once feared him. As seasons changed, the man continued to live quietly, but with purpose. He knew the true battle was not against enemies, but against fear, hate, and misunderstanding. He had learned that the greatest strength came from courage, kindness, and the belief that people could change. One evening, as he looked out over the town from a hilltop, the sky filled with stars, the man felt a deep sense of peace. He had come as a stranger, faced challenges that could have broken him, and found a place to call home. The town was healing, and so was he, and in that healing, they both found hope. The town had grown quieter in the early morning hours, and the man often found himself walking along the familiar paths before the world fully woke. The air was cool and fresh, filled with the smell of grass and the soft songs of birds. In these quiet moments, he reflected on the journey he had taken and the people he had met. Change had come slowly, like the rising sun. It was not always easy to see at first, but it was real and steady. The people in the town had begun to open their hearts in ways he hadn't expected. One morning, as the man walked toward the center of town, he noticed a small group gathered near the town square. Curious, he moved closer. The group was made up of men and women who had once been distant or suspicious. Now they stood together, smiling and talking. The man felt a warmth in his chest. This was a sign that the town was healing in more ways than one. He approached the group, and one of the women stepped forward. "We were talking about how things have changed," she said. "How we didn't realize what we were missing by holding on to old fears." The man nodded. "Fear is a heavy burden. Letting it go takes courage." They spoke for a while, sharing stories of how they had learned to trust and understand each other. The man listened, grateful for the honest words. Later that day, the man helped organize a small event at the community center. It was a day of sharing food, stories, and laughter. Children played games while adults talked and shared memories. The man watched as people from different backgrounds came together, their differences less important than their shared hopes. During the event, the leader of the group that had once opposed the man approached him. There was a new look in his eyes, one of respect and openness. "I want to thank you," he said simply. "You stayed when many would have left. You helped us see each other in a new light." The man smiled gently. It was not easy, but it was worth it. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the town square, the man stood and addressed the gathering. "We all have the power to change," he said. "To choose kindness over fear, understanding over anger. This town is proof that even the hardest hearts can heal." Applause filled the air, but the man's focus was on the faces before him. Faces that told stories of pain, hope, and growth. That night, the man sat alone on the porch of his small home. The stars were bright and the cool breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers. He thought about the long road he had traveled, the battles fought far away, the challenges faced here, and the people who had changed his life. In that quiet moment, he understood something deeply true. Home was not just a place. It was the people you shared it with, the trust you built, and the hope you carried. The next morning brought a surprise. A family from the town came to visit, bringing food and invitations to join their Sunday meal. The man accepted gratefully, feeling the warmth of their kindness. As he joined them, laughter and stories filled the air. He listened, shared, and felt the simple joy of connection. Days turned into weeks, and the town continued to grow stronger. The man's presence was no longer seen as a threat but as a gift, a symbol of what was possible when fear was replaced by understanding. One afternoon, as he walked near the river, the man met a young girl who was struggling to carry a basket of flowers. He stepped forward and helped her, smiling kindly. "Thank you," she said shyly. "You're welcome," he replied. "Sometimes we all need a little help." They talked briefly about the beauty of the river and the changing seasons. The man saw in her eyes a reflection of the hope he felt for the future. Life was still full of challenges, but the town was learning to face them together. The man knew his journey was far from over. There would always be moments of doubt, fear, and misunderstanding, but he also knew that with patience, kindness, and courage, those moments could be overcome. As the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky with colors of orange and purple, the man stood quietly, feeling at peace. He had come to this town as a stranger, met with suspicion and fear. Now he was part of a community, a family, bound not by blood but by shared hope, and in that hope, they all found strength. The days in the town grew warmer as summer approached. The air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers and the sound of children playing outside. The man noticed these simple joys and felt grateful for the changes that had begun. Life was not perfect, but there was something powerful in the way the town was coming together. People who had once kept their distance were now sharing smiles, conversations, and moments of kindness. One morning, the man received an unexpected visit from an elderly woman. She walked slowly but with purpose, carrying a basket of fresh bread. "I wanted to thank you," she said softly. for staying, for helping, and for showing us a better way." The man accepted the bread with a nod and a smile. "It's been a journey for all of us," he replied. "I am grateful for the chance to be part of it." The woman's eyes glistened. "You remind us that everyone has a story. Sometimes we just need to listen." Their conversation lingered in the man's mind. It was true. Every person in the town carried stories, fears, and hopes. Understanding those stories was the key to breaking down walls. That afternoon, the man walked through the marketplace. Stalls were filled with fresh fruits, vegetables, and handmade goods. Neighbors greeted each other warmly. He stopped at a stall where a young woman sold flowers. "Those are beautiful," he said. She smiled. "Thank you. I hope they bring happiness." He bought a small bouquet and carried it with him. It was a simple gesture, but filled with meaning. Later, he visited the town's small library. It was a quiet place where people came to read and learn. The man found a corner and began to read stories about courage, kindness, and change. As he read, children gathered nearby, curious about the stranger who was now part of their town. He smiled and invited them to sit and listen. Together, they read stories of heroes who fought not with weapons but with hearts full of hope. The children's eyes sparkled as they listened, and the man felt a deep connection with them. They represented the future, a future where fear could be replaced by understanding. One evening, the town gathered for a celebration. It was a festival to mark the coming of summer and the new bonds that had been formed. People wore bright clothes, shared food, and danced under strings of lights. The man stood among them, feeling a sense of belonging he had never known before. As music played, he noticed the group of men who had once opposed him. They stood quietly watching. Then, one by one, they began to join the dance. It was a small but powerful moment, a sign that even the deepest wounds could begin to heal. The festival continued late into the night, filled with laughter and hope. In the days that followed, the man continued his quiet work in the town. He helped repair a fence at the school, taught a few neighbors how to grow vegetables, and listened to the stories of those around him. He knew the road ahead would not always be easy. There would be setbacks and moments of doubt, but he also knew that the spirit of the town was stronger than ever. One morning, as he walked by the river, he found a small boat tied to the shore. Inside was a note. "Thank you for teaching us to believe." The man smiled, his heart full. He realized that the greatest battles were fought not on distant fields, but in the hearts and minds of people, and he had helped win a battle of that kind. As the sun set, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and gold, the man looked out over the town. He thought about the strangers who had become neighbors, the fear that had turned into friendship, and the hope that had blossomed in the place he now called home. The journey was far from over, but the future was bright, and in that brightness, they all found peace. The early morning sun was soft, casting a gentle light across the town. The man walked slowly through the streets, noticing the small signs of life waking up. People were already out, tending to gardens, opening shops, and greeting neighbors. He paused near the old park bench where he had spent many quiet moments thinking about the journey he had taken. The bench was worn, but it held memories of conversations, of moments shared, of the slow turning of hearts. Life in the town was changing in ways that could not always be seen, but the man felt them deeply. There was a new sense of calm, a sense of possibility. One afternoon, he was invited to meet with the town's council. They wanted to talk about ways to build on the progress they had made and to create new opportunities for everyone. The man listened carefully as the council members spoke about their hopes for the future, better schools, safer streets, and a stronger sense of community. When it was his turn, the man shared ideas he had gathered from his time here. He spoke of the power of education, of the importance of listening, and of the need to keep building trust. The council thanked him, and he left with a sense of purpose. There was still much work to be done, but the path was clear. In the days that followed, the man helped organize workshops for young people. These workshops were about learning new skills, working together, and dreaming big. The children and teenagers came eagerly, curious about what they could learn. The man taught them not only practical skills, but also about respect, teamwork, and believing in themselves. One young girl, shy at first, began to speak more openly as the weeks passed. She told stories about her family and her dreams. The man listened and encouraged her, knowing that every voice mattered. The town also began to hold regular gatherings where people could share their concerns and hopes. These meetings, are not always easy. Sometimes old fears surfaced, and voices grew loud, but the man was there helping to keep the peace, reminding everyone that change took patience and kindness. Slowly, the meetings became places of true conversation. People began to understand each other better. They found common ground and made plans for a brighter future. One day, the man was walking near the edge of town when he saw a group of teenagers practicing a game. They called him over and invited him to join. He laughed and agreed. For a while, they played and joked, the sounds of their laughter filling the air. It was a simple moment, but it meant a great deal. It was a sign that the next generation was growing up with a new sense of trust and friendship. That evening, the man sat with an old friend from the town. They spoke about the journey they had both taken, the challenges, the victories, and the lessons learned. The friend looked at him with gratitude. "You've given us something we didn't think was possible, hope." The man smiled quietly. Hope is always there. Sometimes it just needs a little help to grow. As the seasons changed once more, the man reflected on the many faces he had come to know, the children who laughed and learned, the neighbors who shared meals and stories. The once fearful, now hopeful, his heart was full. The journey was far from over, but the town had taken important steps forward. Together, they were building something new, something lasting. The morning light streamed softly through the windows, filling the small room with a gentle warmth. The man sat quietly, sipping his coffee and watching the town begin to stir awake. There was something peaceful about these early moments before the day's work began. Life had settled into a rhythm, but the man knew that true peace was never something you could take for granted. It needed care, attention, and the willingness to face new challenges as they came. That day, he decided to visit the local school. Education had become a deep passion for him, not just learning from books, but learning from each other. The classrooms were filled with energy and excitement. Children eagerly gathered around, ready to share their thoughts and dreams. The man listened as they talked about their futures, their hopes, and even their fears. He saw in their eyes the same spirit that had carried him through difficult times, the desire to be seen, to be heard, and to make a difference. He spent time helping the teachers with lessons about teamwork and respect. They practiced listening carefully to one another, solving problems together and understanding different points of view. One teacher approached him quietly. "You have changed so much here," she said. "The children are learning not just from books, but from your example." The man smiled, feeling humbled. "It is their courage that inspires me." After school, the man walked through the streets, stopping to greet neighbors and friends. There was a softness to the town now, a kindness in the way people looked at each other and the small acts of care they showed. He visited a small community garden where people gathered to grow vegetables and flowers. It was a place of shared work and shared joy. The man helped plant seeds alongside others, feeling connected to the earth and to the people around him. As the sun climbed higher, the man was called to help with a project to repair the town's playground. Children had missed playing safely, and the community wanted to create a place where they could laugh and be free. The work was hard, but it brought everyone together. Old fears and suspicions were replaced by shared effort and the sound of tools working in harmony. During breaks, the man talked with the parents and elders. They shared stories of the past and hopes for the future. The man listened, understanding that healing came from both honoring history and dreaming new dreams. One afternoon, a visitor arrived, a reporter from a nearby city. She wanted to learn about the town's journey, to tell the story of how change was possible even in the most difficult places. The man agreed to speak with her, hoping that sharing their story might inspire others. In the interview, he spoke honestly about fear, courage, and the power of kindness. "We are all more alike than different," he said. "When we choose to listen and to care, walls begin to come down." The reporter smiled, sensing the deep truth in his words. After she left, the man felt a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that their story was not just for the town, but for anyone willing to believe in change. That evening, as the town settled into quiet, the man stood by the riverbank. The water moved gently, reflecting the fading light. He thought about how far they had come, the moments of fear, the fights, the small victories, and the growing trust. He understood that the journey of healing was ongoing, but he was ready for whatever came next. The town had become more than a place to live. It was a symbol of hope, a reminder that courage and kindness could transform even the darkest places. And in that knowledge, the man found peace. The day began with a gentle breeze and clear blue skies. The man stood outside his small home, watching as the town came alive with the sounds of morning. The familiar rhythm of life brought a quiet comfort to his heart. He had learned to appreciate these simple moments: the sun rising, the soft rustle of leaves, the laughter of children playing nearby. These were the signs of a community healing, growing stronger with each day. That morning, the man decided to visit the town's community center. It had become a place where people gathered not only for meetings but for celebrations, learning, and support. He walked inside, greeted by warm smiles and the smell of fresh coffee. A group of people was busy preparing for a special event, a day to honor the history and culture of the town. The man joined in, helping arrange chairs and set up tables. The energy in the room was hopeful, filled with anticipation. As the event began, stories were shared. Elders spoke of the town's past, the struggles, the losses, and the moments of courage that had shaped the community. Younger people listened attentively, gaining a deeper understanding of where they came from. The man felt the power of these stories. They were a reminder that healing was not about forgetting the past but learning from it and moving forward together. After the storytelling, there was music and dancing. The man watched as people of all ages joined in, their movements full of joy and freedom. It was a celebration of life, resilience, and connection. Later, the man spoke with a young woman who was leading a project to help local families in need. She explained how the community was working to support one another through food drives, tutoring programs, and friendship. The man offered his help. Knowing that building a stronger future required everyone's effort, days passed, and the man continued to be involved in the town's activities. He helped organize a cleanup of the local park, worked with children on their reading skills, and spent quiet evenings listening to neighbors' stories. One afternoon, he received an invitation to speak at the town's school graduation. It was an honor he accepted with humility. On the day of the ceremony, the man stood before the graduates, young people ready to step into the world with dreams and determination. He spoke about the importance of kindness, courage, and believing in themselves. He reminded them that their voices mattered and that they had the power to make a difference. The graduates listened closely, their eyes shining with hope. After the ceremony, the man was surrounded by families and friends, all expressing their gratitude and sharing their own hopes for the future. That night, the man sat alone on a hill overlooking the town. The lights twinkled below like stars come to rest on earth. He thought about the journey, the long road from fear and suspicion to trust and friendship. He knew there would still be challenges ahead, but he also knew that the town had changed in ways that could not be undone. Hope was alive here. And as he looked up at the sky, he felt a deep peace. The journey had been hard, but it had been worth every step. The morning sun came up slowly, casting long shadows across the town. The man woke early, as was his habit, and stepped outside. The air was cool and fresh, filled with the soft sounds of birds and the gentle rustling of leaves. He took a deep breath and looked around. The town had changed so much since he arrived. What was once quiet and uncertain was now alive with hope and energy. That day, the man decided to visit the local community garden again. It was a place where people worked side by side, growing vegetables and flowers. It had become a symbol of the town's growth, roots digging deep into the earth, reaching for the sun. As he walked through the garden, he saw children planting seeds and adults tending to the soil. Laughter and conversation filled the air. The man smiled, feeling a quiet joy. A woman approached him with a basket full of fresh tomatoes and cucumbers. She handed some to him, her eyes bright. "We've had a good harvest," she said. "Thanks to all the help," the man nodded. "It's amazing what we can do when we work together." The garden was more than just a place to grow food. It was a place to grow trust and friendship. Later, the man went to the town hall where a meeting was taking place. The community was discussing new plans to improve the town. Better roads, more activities for children, and support for families. The man listened carefully as people spoke. He could see the determination in their eyes, the desire to build a better future. When it was his turn, he shared ideas about teamwork and respect. He reminded everyone that change took time and patience, but that every small step mattered. After the meeting, the man stayed to help clean up. He enjoyed these moments, arcing alongside his neighbors, building something together. As the weeks passed, the man became more involved in the town's life. He helped organize sports events for the youth, led workshops on basic skills, and volunteered at the local clinic. Each day brought new challenges, but also new opportunities to connect and grow. One afternoon, the man received a letter from a distant friend. It was a reminder of his past, a past filled with struggle and strength. Reading the letter, he felt a mix of emotions, pride in how far he had come and hope for the future he was helping to build. That evening, the man walked to the river. The water was calm and clear, reflecting the colors of the setting sun. He thought about the journey he had taken, from a stranger met with fear to a member of a caring community. The town was still healing, but the wounds were closing, and in their place, something beautiful was growing. The man knew that life would always bring challenges, but he was ready, because he was no longer alone. He had a community. He had hope, and that was enough. The morning came quietly, with soft light spilling over the rooftops of the town. The man woke early as usual, feeling the calm that had slowly settled into his life. He stepped outside and took a deep breath, savoring the fresh air and the peaceful sounds of the waking town. As he walked down the familiar streets, he noticed the small changes that had taken root. A new flower bed outside the library, fresh paint on the school walls, and the laughter of children playing in the distance. These were signs of a town healing, growing stronger together. The man's steps led him toward the community center, a place that had become the heart of the town's new spirit. Today was important. A group was coming to discuss a plan to improve the local park, a place where families could gather, children could play safely, and neighbors could connect. Inside the center, a crowd had gathered. People of all ages sat in a circle, eager to share ideas and listen to one another. The man found a seat among them, his presence calm and steady. The meeting began with a young woman speaking about the need for safe spaces in the town. She talked about her own children and the importance of having a park where they could be free and happy. Others shared their thoughts. Some spoke of the need for better lighting, others of adding benches and picnic tables. There were worries about money and how to make the plans a reality, but the spirit of cooperation filled the room. The man spoke last. He reminded everyone that the most important thing was working together, trusting each other, and believing in their shared future. The group agreed to form a committee, each person taking a role. Plans were made for fundraisers, volunteer days, and meetings with the town officials. As the meeting ended, the man stayed behind to help clean up. He enjoyed these moments, the simple act of working side by side, building not just a park but a community. In the following weeks, the man devoted much of his time to the park project. He worked alongside neighbors, painting fences, planting flowers, and fixing playground equipment. The work was hard, but it brought people closer. One afternoon, while resting on a bench, the man was approached by a teenager from the town. The young person looked nervous but determined. "I want to help," the teenager said. "I want to be part of something good." The man smiled warmly and welcomed the offer. He knew that every generation needed to find its place, to feel valued and needed. Together, they planned events and gathered volunteers. The teenager grew more confident, and the man felt hope for the future. Around the town, more signs of change appeared. Local businesses offered discounts to support the project. Schools held art contests to design signs for the park. Families organized cleanup days, turning work into celebration. The man watched as the community grew stronger, their bonds deepening with every shared effort. One evening, as the sun dipped low, the man stood at the edge of the park. The new benches were in place, the flowers blooming, and the playground looked ready to welcome children once again. He thought about how far the town had come, the walls of fear and mistrust slowly crumbling. The man knew that healing was a long journey, but he believed that the seeds they had planted would continue to grow, because this town was learning, what it meant to be a true community, to care for one another, to build a future, together. The man felt a quiet joy as he turned to walk home. The path ahead was still full of work, but it was also full of promise, and that promise was enough.